We acknowledge the land we stand on is the territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit,
the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations,
Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Prem Gill, and I'm the CEO of Creative BC, and we're really proud to be here today and the sponsors of this panel. Is my audio okay? I'm just going to ask our tech people. Yes? Okay, because I'm just hearing some feedback, so I wanted to make sure it's clear for everybody. I'm speaking to you today from the unceded territories, ancestral territories of the Coast Salish people, the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh, and really proud and excited to be joined by three amazing panelists, Maritza, Vinay, and Andy, who are going to share their journeys of working in the industry, what's happening for them now, how they started, and where they see the future going. And the reason that we wanted to touch on this subject, the panel is called Indigenous Black People of Color Panel, Getting In and Moving Up. And over the last couple of years here at Creative BC, we have been focused on workforce advancement, and also we have workforce growing needs here in British Columbia and across the country and really all over the world for both below the line and above the line. And what that means is people who are all the crafts and tradespeople who make a film and project happen, to the above the line folks, the writers, producers, directors, all of these essential roles, and people who work in animation and post-production. And we actually did a labor market study to look at what are the workforce needs here in British Columbia in the next few years as demand continued to grow for content and for production facilities here. And what we learned was that the diversity of our workforce was not looking like our overall population or the workforce more broadly, which if you've worked in the industry for a long time, you probably didn't really need a study to tell you that, but we actually have the, as I like to say, we have the receipts. So we can now really approach and do work differently. So we are in the process of building a website called Creative Pathways there's a web page up right now if you go to creativepathwayscanada.com, but we will be launching a full website in probably January, which will be focused on information for the industry and learning opportunities, as well as recruitment and promotion to connect employers, labor organizations, and equity-focused opportunities with candidates. And it will also provide online networking. So really trying to break down barriers, work to support equity-seeking groups towards employment, and both working across the industry, both the independent production industry, and largely here in British Columbia, we have a very significant service industry and visual effects and animation community. So what I'm going to do now is taking a breath and going to stop speaking, because I really want you to meet these amazing people who, I've hadn't had a chance to talk to them much, but I've been researching them and reading their bios, and I think you're really going to enjoy learning about their individual journey. So I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. and tell us a little bit about how they got started. And then we will go into a conversation on a little more detail. I also invite, if you're tuned in right now and you're watching this live and not recorded, feel free to ask questions in the chat, and we will look at them as we are speaking. And we've got just under an hour, and I want to really have really listen to Maritza, Andy, and Vinay, because I think everybody is going to really be inspired by these folks as well. So Andy, why don't we start with you? Tell us a little bit about yourself, and where did you start in the industry?
Thank you. Oh, there we go. I unmuted myself.
Yes.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, Creative BC and Prem. So to kind of tell you why I make stories and why it kind of got me into this industry, a lot of it has to do with my experience as just like an individual. I came to Canada as a refugee when I was about 7 years old with my family, and we grew up in the welfare system, and kind of, we were looking to achieve the Canadian dream. And growing up for me, I didn't really see my family on screen. I didn't see the immigrant experience. I didn't see Latinas represented in a positive way. And, looking back at it now, I think there was very little, I would say, examples for what I could look up to in comparison to my brothers. And then as I started getting into storytelling and really kind of figuring out that that's something that I wanted to pursue, I was able to get into the UBC Film School. And I graduated with a thesis film that kind of was about my experience as an immigrant. And thankfully that film has really kind of catapulted my career as a storyteller. I really was able to get into the children's markets and film festivals, and and then in terms of like being able to work in the industry full time to put a roof over my head, because initially you can't really do that as a director, especially when you're just starting out. I worked as a second AC in the camera department for MOWs here in Vancouver. I worked kind of my way up to be a first AC at some points, but after a long time of just working so much on set, not being able to dedicate time and energy into my own stories that I wanted to tell, I decided I kind of needed to change. And as I started making, stories in the weekends and kind of dedicating time to that with my friends who I graduated school with, I was able to kind of find my way into the production office. And I really enjoyed that aspect of filmmaking because because I also really enjoy when it comes to production and kind of, putting out fires and being able to be in the thick of it, aside from the actual storytelling itself. So I worked in the documentary series world as a production coordinator for a couple of shows. And then I kind of weaseled my way into the narrative as a production coordinated one feature film. And I really, for me, I really enjoyed that aspect again, because it challenged me as not only as a storyteller, but I was able to kind of understand what actually goes into making a film from the very minute details of like tax breaks and things like that. So that really helped me. And again, along those time, during that same time, I was also challenging myself and putting time towards my own stories as a storyteller. And I've had made, several short films. I had one that I just independently financed, thanks to some sponsorship with William F. White's. And then I was able to get a Story Hub project funded for the pilot edition that they did in 2020. And then I was also able to be a part of the Crazy Eight's top 6 finalist, which is a competition here in BC that allows for 6 filmmakers to make their films, and they only have 8 days to make them. And that really, I think at that point I realized, I really wanted to focus as a filmmaker, focus as a storyteller, and kind of really prioritize other storytellers that haven't really found their way or don't really know how to do it, especially if they're coming out of film school or didn't go to film school at all. So with my friends and I from film school, we created a company called Studio 104 Entertainment, and we have had some really amazing success in the past 2 years of just having short films and kind of really catering to young storytellers and also BIPOC storytellers. And so yeah, I mean, I'm still in the industry working in the kind of the office here and there to be able to put a roof over my head, in expensive Vancouver. But at the same time, I was able to get signed with a manager that helps me kind of get into the room with really important people to get my stories out there. So that's kind of the trajectory of me, and and the stories that I'd like to keep telling. And that's just, being able to provide a voice to the examples I wish I would have had when I was younger.
Yeah, that is so great. Thank you for really being so succinct and giving us a lot of information. I have many questions I'm going to come back and ask you, but I really think it's what's interesting to me for you in particular is how you have really leveraged all the things offered in an ecosystem, from Crazy Eights to Story Hive to a variety of things. So I want to come back and hear more about that from you. Maritza, you have also had a cross section of experiences in this industry.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I'm sorry. So my name.
Yeah, you're on.
I'm half Syilx, half Swepkin. I'm from the interior BC. When did I get into the industry? Okay, so let's put it all down into little thing. All right, so I got into the industry about in the early aughts, those wondrous days of around 2005. I went to school under the belief that I needed to go to fine art school to somehow get into animation. I'm not sure where that idea got into my head, but it did. Quickly, within a year, I realized that was not the place for me to be, and that's not where I wanted to focus my energy. So lo and behold, I dropped out and I went and focused my energy onto film school. So I went straight into film school. I took a condensed year program, wicked intense, and it was all things 3D. And it was wonderful. It was really wonderful. It was hard, very challenging, but I really enjoyed it. And that's kind of one thing I actually wanted to point out to some folks too, is if getting into this industry is also really difficult. And if you feel like you're not getting the tools or the resources that you need to further your advancement, don't be afraid to change. But if you do make that change, make sure that you change and then you commit to it. And that was just kind of the really big thing for me. Yeah.
Interesting. And also, that's perfect. We're going to come, we have many things to talk about, but also just I really want to talk about with all of you coming back to get you to start thinking about this, is the value of building and your networks in this industry and how that helps you not only with your own projects, but many other things. So I'm going to come back to that shortly. But hello, Vinay. Welcome. Great to see you.
Great to see you. I hear all these wonderful speakers. Amazing.
Yes, well, you're one of them. So tell us about where you're at now and how you entered the industry.
Yes, my journey started in India, actually. I went to school in India. All my grade 12, everything was done in India. But then I always knew I wanted to get into the arts, visual arts, fine arts, something along those lines. I couldn't imagine myself as a doctor or engineer, the stereotypical career choices of an Indian person there. So I got into a bachelor's of animation graphic design, just to dip my toes in that field, just to see what it is about and see if it is for me. But I really enjoyed it, and I stuck around, and I ended up working for a company, young up and coming company in India, which did a lot of the advertising, architectural walkthroughs, and create storyboards and story consulting and everything. So I really enjoyed that role as well. But then something was pulling me towards Vancouver Film School, because I really wanted to further my education in storytelling. So I got selected to study here in Vancouver Film School with a minor scholarship, and I really enjoyed that as well. Anything that came my way, I tried to give my 100%. It's just the thing is, being an immigrant to this country, it's always hard. There's always a lot of stumbling blocks that you encounter along the way. So you're always on survival mode, you just want to survive the next day before you can flourish. So it took me a good long 10, 12 years to get to where I am today, but I'm happy with my progress so far.
That's great. And I do, it's funny what you're saying about, expectations of Indian parents, right?
Yes.
That or many immigrant parents of not taking that path that is easy for them to understand too, right? But even though Bollywood is such a huge industry in India,
Yes.
nobody's encouraging their people, their children, to enter the industry necessarily. So really, thank you for sharing that. So I just want to go back to this idea of, your networks and how that, especially in those early days. Maritza, maybe you can start with this, but also you were part of an Academy Award winning team that built the Spider-Verse. Do you want to talk about that too a little bit? You didn't say that earlier.
Oh yeah, sorry. I don't know if we were doing like a bio thing. Yeah, no, sorry. So yes, I've been doing this now for about almost 17 years now, and I've worked in animated features, visual effects, games, game cinematics, TV, and I've kind of started as a modeler and worked my way up to senior modeler, also supervisor, and I've done various other roles. And more recently, I'm like shifting my career towards more visual development, kind of going closer and closer to the core of creation of characters, and really just loving all of that. So I guess there's still a little bit of an artiste left in me, but not terribly a lot. But working on with Sony at that company was really great. It's kind of like it's really weird. Yeah, if you look at my resume, there's like that's my time at Sony. I think I worked on like 4 or 5 shows, and it's just like it was kind of fun because I got to work on the beginning of all stuff, kind of help with the look of things, and to work with really talented folks out that way. Tombstone was one of my characters. I got to work on Spider Noir, another one that was really great. But networking definitely within that was important. Your peers and the people that you work with are the people that are going to recommend you for work elsewhere. They're going to want to be able to connect with them, and also to be to share information. And well, you don't want to be a jerk, essentially what it kind of boils down to, because you're going to be spending so much time with these folks. That's the one thing about animation is that, and especially in assets in the front end, you're working with other departments, not just your own. You're working with the downstream and upstream departments, and you really need to be a team player. And that's something that's really interesting, that you don't, art is typically something that is a solo sport, but in animation, it's very much a team. You need to be a part of a team to do this. That's why networking is really important, and connecting with other colleagues at other studios, because when that contract runs out and it finishes and that project's done, then you're going to need to look for work elsewhere, maybe at the same studio or at another studio. And building that network up is really important. And I really wish I kind of did a little bit more of that when I was younger. But, you learn as you go, and that's kind of just how it happens.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I think the team aspect is, prevalent across the industry, whether it's live action or animation or web series or whatever it is you're doing, that, unless it's a very specialized documentary with just a very tiny crew, even that is still a team, right? So I don't think that can be underestimated. But Andy, I'm curious for you, when I mentioned this idea of networks and kind of building your community, and that you're there. You've done a lot of things like Crazy Eights are all about your community networks of people coming to work on your project, and then you'll go work on your friend's project, and one day you'll all be making your versions of the Spider-Verse, right? I have no doubt about that. But what was it like though when you were first trying to? It can be a very closed culture as well, and if you're new to the industry, and if you hadn't come out of film school and you were looking at people coming who are just coming on as a PA and starting to work on productions, how do you see that type of person trying to build a community and a network?
That's a good question, because it is true. Like for me, I was very lucky that my network really came from the film school, really came from us. Like UBC didn't have equipment, so for our shorts we had to go out there and make relationships with Backlot and William F. White's and Sim and Panavision and ask them for help, or help, but give us discounts. And then we created that community like that with them for the shorts without us even graduating yet. And then of course with the friends I went to school with, I now created a company with, and I'm constantly making projects. And I'm lucky enough that I literally would not be at the success or at the point of my life making these projects if I hadn't had their support. So when someone goes into the industry having not gone to film school, my only advice would be like, you know, be a part of the indie film community as well. Don't just PA for the big shows, which they're great. There's a lot to learn. You get a lot of exposure to what you want to do, you know, but in the independent kind of world that Vancouver does have, I remember I would also go out of my way, and maybe this is a little bit different now, but I would go out of my way to, you know, on Facebook groups, they would be like, hey, we need a PA for a short film, or hey, we need a second AC for a short film. And, you know, even if a lot of those positions are volunteer, because I was able to work on set, and then maybe on the weekends, I was able to volunteer for some smaller shorts. A lot of the shorts that I used to, or a lot of the like small web series or independent feature films that I used to volunteer for as a PA and as a like second EC or other kind of departments, I still work with a lot of those the people that kind of run those, because, you know, they gave me a chance to ask questions when I got there. And in the independent kind of production, you're able to ask questions and really kind of understand how people do it or achieve the story in a lower kind of budget, and really you get a lot more exposure to things that I think you don't really get if you're a PA in the bigger shows, where let's say you put you out in the parking lot and you're out there for 15 hours, whereas you're a PA in an independent show, you're kind of like almost in the thick of it, and you really get to see how the director or how the producer or how everyone kind of manages their own role. So my encouragement would be, you know, kind of go out there into the independent scene, you know, be a part of like groups if there's ever any seminars or any networking events. I know it's a lot harder now that, you know, post-COVID, or in the middle of COVID, because you don't get to go to as many film festivals that there are in person and get to network as I used to do when I was, you know, trying to get out there and expand my network more than just UBC. So, you know, trying to put yourself out there, and it might be hard at first, but know that you're not doing it alone. Like, everyone else is also putting themselves out there. And, you know, ask questions. You know, if you saw a short film that you really liked, reach out to that filmmaker and ask them how they did it, and ask them if they're working on anything, and if you can help in any way, or if, you know, if you want to learn from that, like, you know, reach out to the local filmmakers and storytellers in Vancouver, because a lot of them, you know, are also looking to expand their network. So you have a lot to bring to the table. So, you know, don't be afraid to put yourself out
there. That's really great advice, because there is everything happening here, right? There is an independent community doing a variety of things. There is the established and continually growing what we call the service industry, the foreign service industry, that is offering a variety of opportunities. But I never thought about the PA position in that way, where, you know, when you're on a production of like 400 crew versus 20, but both experiences are so valuable and interesting. You know, so Vinay, it just was sort of leading me to think about what you came from India, you said 12 years ago. And, you know, what was it like, you know, coming from, you know, the creative industry work that you were doing in India to coming to Canada, and then really trying to figure out how to find your place here? And, you know, where did you first find a community or a network for yourself?
Actually, for myself, even though I finished animation at Vancouver Film School, and my film was selected one of the best in the class, and then I went on to do their film festival scholarship and all this. I got all this attention after that course that I did. I had a really hard time breaking into the industry. I don't know, for whatever reason, because for new immigrants coming here, you need a certain kind of work permit to start working in the industry. And then it's very hard, because it's very hard for a student to get that work permit before you can start working. So the companies here, many of the studios, they totally reject, like, whenever you send in your application, it's for a job opportunity, like, you get neglected for that reason. And then for me, actually, I found community with the South Asian community here in BC, which is in Surrey. I didn't feel alienated here in Surrey. I don't know why that is, but you kind of went into that. And then I got a job as a graphic designer, art director at a leading South Asian magazine here. And I've been doing quite okay. I'm comfortable, and then I'm trying to get out and then meet people and then network that way. And then I've met a lot of people who were in the publishing industry, and then we've done a lot of videos that we edit. And then so for me, getting into films was not a straightforward journey. Like, it took me a long time. And then actually my networks, I volunteered for this organization called Share Vancouver, and I've done a lot of graphic design work for them. And then and the founder, Alex Sanga, who's also a well-known activist here in the South Asian community, he's the one who gave me an opportunity to direct a movie which actually got into real world. And I'm part of this panel because of that, because somebody needs to put their trust and their belief that you can perform and then you can do something worthwhile. So somebody needs to give you that opportunity. It's very hard for a person of color to go and get that on the first. And then, like, it's hard to even approach people because you've had that hurt of rejection before, and then to ask for an opportunity is even a painful thing. So I'm slowly getting over it, but it's taking me time. And then hopefully this will be the time that I'll just break out of this and then get into that.
And do you want to tell us about your film that's in the festival?
My film Emergence Out of the Shadows is about the queer South Asians who are based in Metro Vancouver. And then we really didn't want to just have a coming out stories, because even coming out stories within South Asian communities are hard to find. Like, there's not much content in this topic. So what we wanted to do is, like, I met a lot of my work during my over the years. Like, I've worked with Share Vancouver. I met a lot of amazing parents who were accepting of their children no matter who they are. Doesn't matter their sexuality or whatever. It's just so I wanted to include their stories as well, their side of the story. So this is why we wanted to do a story that complements and then informs and includes the parents of the queer South Asians here. So I think it turned out, and then pandemic really helped us create this film as well, because if not for the pandemic, I wouldn't be able to do something else on the side and then get this going. And then it's interesting. Yes.
Yeah, well, I think that's really great, Vinay, because it's, sometimes it's your cultural community, it's literally your family, your film school colleagues, but it doesn't mean that you're necessarily, even within those environments, we know all of the discrimination and barriers that happen across institutions, whether they're schools or corporations or companies, whatever it is. And I think, really what I'm hearing from all of you is that you found your people, and then from there, it continues to grow. But it is about, trust as well with people and shared values. And I don't think that can be underestimated. We have an audience question, and I'm going to have you, Maritza, take it first. And I think it's a great question, because the question is, how do you balance working on your own projects and then working on those projects to get the rent paid? So, I mean, you were at Sony ImageWorks working on giant projects. Were you still going home at night and doing your own, working on your own characters and scripts?
This is actually a really interesting question. Just because that in my early days, there was so much hustle to be faster, be better, to make the connections, to get the work done, to fight to get the next character, because the type of work I do is fairly competitive for character work. And then if you're faster and quicker and better, less revisions, then you get more of that work. So for a long time, I was so focused on my work that I didn't make time for personal projects early on, which I regret to this day. And it wasn't until probably midway into my career that I really started to come back to this and focus on personal projects, because that's where you're going to find the most fulfillment. On top of that, if you in our type of work, there you can become very emotionally invested in the stuff that you're working on, and you need to have your other side projects to put all that energy into to have that space to learn, to advance, especially in a very technological field where it's constantly changing every year. You have to learn the new technology. You need to be competitive. And to do this, these side projects really do help that. It helps scratch that creative itch, helps you grow, and it also leads to other work. A lot of my other work, my freelance work, has come from my personal projects. And they're just really fun too, because you're also your own boss at that point in time. When you're doing your personal projects, you're making the creative decisions. There's no revisions on your work other than the ones that you choose to do and to explore or to change. Or if you don't like what you're doing, then you stop it and you start a different project. You know, it's I can't express how important it is to do the personal projects and to try and balance it. Time to recover. I do a lot of mentor with Rise Up Animation, and I always tell my mentees, please do personal projects, but also remember to also please schedule downtime, because you do need to recharge, because you can't burn it full blast and then leave nothing in the tank, because you still have to go back to work on Monday and do the work at work and deliver work.
Totally. And burnout is a big factor, especially when you are, you know, if you're working in live action, very long days, right? Or nights, given, you know, depending on what you're doing. You know, Andy, when you talked a lot about, you know, doing across, you know, working in independent production, larger scale shows, and, you know, trying to get your experiences where you can, and you start to build your network in your community. But when you think about this question, and I should also note that you mentioned a lot of great, you know, festivals, and that's where you were making connections and what we don't have that exactly happening right now. We are making it happen in spaces like this, which are virtual. But you know, if you're not following, I'll do a plug for Creative BC on our variety of socials, that there are a lot of things happening, both virtually and in person is starting to happen. There are screenings coming up for the Vancouver Asian Festival, the Vancouver South Asian Festival in the next few weeks that are going to be in-person screenings. And if you're comfortable, you know, those are going to be great places to start to connect and build. But coming back to this question, Andy, how do you actually, what do you do to not get burned out? Because you are doing many things.
You know, it's definitely not easy. Like, I can only really speak of my own experience. You know, coming out of film school, I knew I needed to focus on making money. And I had just made a short, so I didn't really, I think for me, I was like, I need a break from making a project of my own so I can kind of put it out there and then hope that it gets into a festival while I go to work and kind of work on set. You know, as I started to get more into set work and the long hours and every single day, and then Fridays and only really having a Sunday off where I had to literally devote time to like clean my house and like do laundry and like the basic necessities, you know, it was very hard to find that like that small moment of time where you have the actual energy to write your stories or, you know, pursue something that is personal. So, you know, for me, I just started to realize that I couldn't work on set consistently like that anymore. I needed to figure out a different dynamic. So I looked into the production office and seeing if that was different. And, you know, it was in certain cases for documentary. But, you know, that kind of, again, I did that for like a year and a half and I was like, okay, I almost want another shift. I want something different. And again, on those weekends, I kind of dedicated the time because I was able to have weekends during the documentary portion of my career to like really dedicate time towards my projects. And, you know, again, I had the community. I was able to sit down, write scripts. I was able to kind of make really short, low budget shorts and help out other friends that were doing that as well. And then, you know, after kind of getting out of documentary, I kind of ventured into more of a, like I did the feature narrative as a production coordinator, and that really kind of took up a lot of my time for like 4 months straight. And I realized, you know, I can't do that again. I can't, like, I'm a very creative person that if I don't really kind of have like creative juices flowing a lot of the time, then I, you know, I think I really struggle to keep motivated at my work off, like the work day and doing a 9 to 5 or doing a 12-hour shift. So yeah, I think, you know, eventually found my way into the commercial world where I was able to take kind of like day calls and where I could, and then just focus the days I had off to really focus on my creative stuff. But, you know, I will just note that like, I don't have any dependents. I don't have a pet. I do have like student, like tuition to have to pay and things like that. But like, there are so many factors that kind of does affect a lot of independent filmmakers. You know, Vinay was talking about being an immigrant, needed to work for that work visa. You know, like that's a very different boat. Thankfully, I became a citizen a long time ago. So, you know, I have a lot of mentees as well that are like, I need to work for 2 years straight to get, you know, my PR. And then it needs to be a consistent kind of work where it might be hard to do that in this industry, but I also want to make my own projects. So I always be like, you know, like if you get a 9 to 5, even if it's in the industry, whether it's an animation studio, whether it's a post-production office where you can, you know, find that community, but still work in the industry, then really take the time, as you would taking the time to go to the gym, as you would taking the time to meditate or other things, take the time to like kind of force yourself to be creative, force yourself to be a part of other friends' projects, and force yourself to make those $1,000 shorts or $500 shorts, like, you know. So it's a hustle. It doesn't end. I'm still hustling as much as I can, and you know, like, I don't know, like just keep going because it's worth it.
For all of you, I see, you know, the passion is there, right? That you want to tell stories. You want to tell stories that speak to you, that are your stories, that are stories of the people around you because you didn't see them. And Maritza, I know that's been a lot of your motivation for your work, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. This is kind of the interesting thing is that I've been doing this for so long now that I'm working on a lot of characters, creatures, and all these different kinds of things. And during this entire time, if you can believe it, up until 6 months ago or so, I had not ever once been asked to or had the opportunity to actually model an Indigenous character in CG at all. Not even as a background person, not even as like a crowd double in the way back, nothing. And it kind of got under my skin. And it was like that with after another one of being in like in art meetings and looking at, I've done some characters and they're like asking me casually, I'm not going to name names, what studio it was, but ask me, can you reduce the ethnicity down a little bit to make this, and they're not so many words saying these kinds of things. And it kind of really motivated me to want to see this change, to have more Indigenous representation in there. And I'm not 100% sure, you know, if it's sensitivity, cautiousness, lack of awareness, or what it is that we're not actually represented in any of these kinds of ways other than stereotypes. Stereotypes are caricatures of Indigenous people. Recently, though, we are starting to see a slight shift and going into the direction of actually having Indigenous characters. And I'd love to see that normalized, or us to be there and to have our own stories, not to be, you know, beads and bows kind of thing, you know, that we do exist in this modern age. We are here, and I'd love to see more of those stories. Reservation Dogs has been really wonderful. Spirit Raiders is coming up, which is great. Rutherford Falls is also coming up. So there is a change that is happening and is inspiring. And it kind of got to the point where I kind of said that, okay, I kept waiting. Maybe I might get to work on a show that has an Indigenous character. And if I wait, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. It doesn't happen. Okay, crap. So, well, what do? Do I wait for it to happen? It may never happen. Or do I go out and make it, for better or for worse, perfectly imperfect, and start it? And that's kind of where I'm going in that direction now.
Yeah, that is, you know, it could have gone either way for you when somebody's asking you to, you know, this character is too ethnic. And what is that really saying? They don't believe the audience can handle it, right? Which is something that I think a lot of this industry has kind of used as a crutch. And
it's the people on top. It's the people on top, to be honest, that don't have faith in the audience being accepting of diversity. Mm-hmm. And I do think it is very possible. To be honest, I've also been in a situation where I was at a studio and the topic kind of brought up that I was Indigenous, and they're like, someone turned around from LA and they're like, "Oh dang, I thought you guys were extinct." They have people, and I was like, "Oh, so poor education system." It's terrible. I'm like, "Well, you met one. Let's go introduce you to some others. It'll be fine." You know, it starts with change, and you know, it's small baby steps. And I think people are starting to recognize that there is more than just, you know, three or four crayons in the coloring blocks for diversity that we can kind of put out there. You know, like you can't just have those three that you want to pick and that are safe and comfortable to use as your I'm covered for my diversity inclusion on this movie. I don't need any more. So no, I think there's so many other stories we could tell, and there's
I think your point on like every aspect from leadership to every role within a production, within the industry, within organizations like the one I work for, that when you start seeing the change of the diversity of people at all levels in the sector, you will see a shift, but it's like we're not there yet. And I think your experiences and stories you've just shared are evidence of that. And this isn't from like 20 years ago stories you're telling. These are recent experiences. Vinay, we have a question here from the audience to talk about. The question is, can you talk about your craft and what gives you inspiration to develop your skills? So, you landed here, you went to film school, it was challenging to get, into the sector. You found your community to start to do that. But, what was your inspiration to keep going?
Inspiration is at some point you need creative control of your life. You're trying to live your life, you're designing stuff for other people, or you're creating something for other people. There's always that barrier that you, like Maritza mentioned before, like you need to have a creative outlet for yourself. There should be something that you do on the side that you can that you can make into a creative outlet for yourself. So for myself, the movie that we just created, and it's running in the film festivals right now, Emergence Out of the Shadows, has been a passion project for all of us, actually, because the people that starred in the movie, the documentary film, were all really close to my heart, and then I'm really close to them, and I wanted to do a good job for myself, and then to um, what do you call that, to add value and then create a social impact, and then create that representation, because it's not there in the mainstream. So that's been inspiring me. And even their stories, the way they came forward to become included in the story, in this film, uh, because they wanted it from a social service perspective. They wanted to do seva, like a social service. So that really inspired me, because if they are able to have the courage to tell their own stories to an audience, in to help other people, and to provide that visibility for other people who are struggling, brown, queer, all these different racialized communities, it's a very I think a very important inspiration in your life. That's what I found.
Your film is showing the intersectionality of South Asian people, and I think that whatever community or wherever you come from, you are not the only spokesperson for that community. So Maritza, you're obviously not speaking for all Indigenous people, all Indigenous creators. You are you, and you bring such value being you and everything that you your shared experiences and stories to the table. And I think that is something that when you're the only one in the room, and I can speak from experience, that you are suddenly the representative of many. And that's not necessarily good for the whole, right? Because this is why we need change at all.
It is weird, that whole concept right there. And I think that puts a lot of pressure on individuals that are in that position to have to lead the discussion, to do Indigenous 101 or Black 101 for whoever has a situation to be in. I have other BIPOC friends that this happens to on the regular, where a protest will come up and then someone will be like, tell me your thoughts on this, what do we need to do? And you're just like, go Google and then go research and then come back, and you have we'll have a dialogue, and I'm happy to help with that. But we're not a monolith. We're very different. Our East Coast Indigenous folks are very different from West Coast, and as the same as the interior, and along the prairies. So I'm actually just really excited to hear more about these other stories, these other places, interior Indigenous people, prairie Indigenous folks. Our wonderful person was Creative BC, Ryan. He's from out east, or in the prairies, and it was really wonderful to connect with him with Creative BC and to learn about his stories. So I'm excited to learn more.
That's what it is, right? Learning. We have to keep learning, all of us. Andy, I'm going to shoot this question to you that's come up. And the question is, can you talk about finding ethnic audiences as well as left-wing and anti-capitalist audiences? So I think the question is really, how do you connect with what so-called non-mainstream audiences, when you don't have, a big streaming network or someone behind you promoting your production or whether it's a feature film or a small short?
I think for me, I mean, for my shorts and what I've done in the past, I've really wanted to have my work play at festivals that weren't, I mean, like, obviously you shoot for the TIFFs and the BIFFs and the Edmonton Film Festivals and Real World, but there's also festivals like the Vancouver Latin American Film Festival or the Toronto Latin American Film Festival or, the Vancouver Asian Film Festival. So there's also like film festivals that are kind of catering towards that specific ethnic audience that perhaps your story kind of really resonates with. Those festivals are definitely ones you want to also put your work out there in. For me, like, I think one of the biggest issues I had even as a storyteller was casting authentically to the characters I was writing, because a lot of them, would be Latin American, but would need to speak a specific kind of dialogue. And it was really difficult to find that in Vancouver. And I always had to venture into like those private Facebook groups of being like, hey, does anybody have any action experience? And if not, would you like to be in a movie? Just because it was difficult to find, at least on my perspective, in my experience, actors that, were non-union or wanted to get out there and also kind of emulated physically the character I had written. But audiences, you never really know how they're going to respond to your work. You always have to just put it out there and hope for the best. And obviously, if you get a question that could be a little bit, coming from like the left wing or anti-capitalist, audiences, it's one of those things where I always like to think about like Michelle Obama's, like, when they go low, you go high, I'll never kind of give them the satisfaction. And your stories are really important, no matter what. Like, you are either speaking from your own voice or you're speaking from an experience or something that you had witnessed. And there is someone out there like you who is going to benefit from that story or is going to enjoy it or is going to inspire. So whether or not they're in your own ethnic community. So, don't give up and kind of just let them to their own devices, I guess.
Yeah, well, people will find the stories. Like Vinay, I think your film, from your description, a lot of people would connect with it, not just, South Asian LGBTQ plus people. I think it sounds like it would be a lot of people. So Real World is a great platform for your film because this is where audiences are looking for things are looking for films that they're not going to see, and maybe even in other festivals. So how is it playing for you? What are you hearing from audiences?
I'm actually very pleased to know the reactions. We've had an opportunity to screen the film at the newest film festival locally here last night, actually. And then we had because usually Vancouver, it's so far it's been virtual screening. So for the first time, I'm getting to meet people and then seeing my film on the big screen. And it was an amazing experience. Like people told me that they were emotional. They wanted to like let out. They were crying. They were trying to connect, and they had all these questions afterwards about the movie. So it just starts that conversation going, like about the film or about the topic or about South Asian people in general. And then just like if you, because there is such a dearth of content in the sphere, that if you create something, I think they will find you rather than you'll have to find them. They will find you, because it's very rare the topics that we cover from our own ethnic experiences.
Definitely. We have about 10 minutes left here, and one question that I'd like you all to think about and answer is, what do you wish somebody had told you when you were first thinking about this, entering the industry, right? It's what would you go back and tell yourself, Maritza?
Oh.
On the spot.
Yeah. I think early on, I think I would have loved to have, doing the mentoring now. I wish I had come to this sooner. If I didn't have a mentor then to be the mentor I wanted to be, mentor yourself, to try and push and to continue, and to keep going, and to learn lean on your networks a bit further. For a long time, I thought I had to do it myself, and that no one was going to do it but me, and that it was all on me to try and figure it out and to keep going. So, but be sure to ask for help along the way. It's important. There's so much, so many resources out there available now today that there weren't back then. Don't be shy. Talk to people in the network. Look for the jobs at the studios that you want to have, and connect with those people. Shoot them a message. Be like, hey, I'm coming up. This is my current work. I would love to work where you're working. Can you take a look at my stuff? Give me some suggestions, that kind of thing, to look at that. Also, the personal projects that I mentioned previously before. I really would have loved to continue to go with that. I also would have liked to have started. There's so many other BIPOC groups that are starting for animation in the last kind of several years. I kind of really wish I had done something with the Indigenous groups. And so now I would like to change that now, moving forward, to connect us, to break down those barriers, and to bring us closer together. Because I see it happening in other groups. Other groups are doing it. There's no reason why we can't too. It's just like, hey, I heard there's a job over here. You're a talented fella. Do you want to work here, or a talented girl? Let's make this happen and bring these people together. I do think lifting each other up is going to bring us all up, all in one go. And I just want to see that happen even further.
No, I love that. And Andy, what do you think when I ask this kind of question?
I completely agree with Maritza, 100%. That's exactly what I would have also said to myself. Ask questions. You don't know all the answers, and don't be afraid to, kind of learn from those mistakes. A lot of, especially as a woman of color, especially because I wanted to tell a lot of stories that had people of color and their own experience. Be strong when the doors close, and they're going to close a lot. But again, when the door closes, there's two more that open. And I think keep pushing forward for those doors to open for you. And if they don't, create your own door. I think it's important to note that this industry is not easy, and no industry, I think, is easy. And because we are artists, because we are storytellers, because we work a lot in a world or this industry where we're dependent on what an audience thinks and how it reacts and things like that, I think it's important to always go back to why you're doing it, and kind of ask yourself what inspired you to do it. And if it's strong enough of a reason to why, then it should still be strong enough now, even 10 years later. For me, it was to make stories that I wish I'd seen when I was younger. And I still think that there's lots of work to be done. And like you were saying before, my experience as a Latina immigrant, can really resonate with a lot of different people from different backgrounds that are also immigrants, because it's a lot of very similar experiences with a lot of, cultural kind of heritage being really instilled in us as young kids. So I think, what I've said before, be the champion of your own story, be ready to fail and be ready to get back up again. And, there isn't one right way to do this. You reach out to other people, you ask them how they did it, you take them out for coffee, you learn, you make that mistake, and then you keep going, and until you're like, I finally got it, so keep going.
Yeah. And Vinay, what about you? What would you have told yourself that now that you didn't know when you were starting out? We'll just have to unmute yourself, Vinay.
Sorry. So I totally agree with what Andy said, and even Maritza said about it's not an easy industry to work in, and then you always have to keep your eye open, and then ask questions and get help. And then there are a lot of people out there who wants to help. Sometimes when you are rejected in a way, you feel like you have to withdraw into your shell, and then it kind of keeps you from progressing. So it's just that so you just keep an eye out, and then ask the questions that you want, and the stories you want to tell. are yours, so nobody else is going to do that for you. And if you have content, you need to create the content so that the people can see what you have to create, and then the stories you have to say. So it's very important that you, because it's your duty as a creator to create, and just keep creating, because this is what keeps this industry going.
And what I heard from all of you, and supporting other creators in their creation. So even if you're not leading something, sometimes it is, being the mentor, or even a collaborator or another voice for people to lean on and talk to. When I was starting out many years ago, there weren't a lot of people like me. And I still think people feel that way, but there was really nobody. And you don't. You have different conversations with people that you share other types of characteristics with. We've just got about 5 minutes left, but we have one more question here, similar to kind of what we've been talking about, but let's answer it. What is the best frank advice you've been given regarding doing business in this industry? Andy?
Yeah.
Maybe it wasn't. It doesn't have to necessarily be good advice, but was there something?
Actually, I remember one of the first days, and this was maybe not the best advice, or I still kind of think about it from time to time. One of the first days at film school, one of the supervisors, when they were doing the orientation, they said, this industry is hard for women. So if you can't handle it, the door's right there. And I still think about it, because I have a friend who actually did walk out the door. And that really kind of scared me, because it just really set up this whole, okay, the world's going to be basically against you this whole time. And you're going to have to prove yourself 3 times more than the other guy. So, especially because you're a woman of color, and because you want to tell diverse stories. So, I think, like I said before, just believe that your story is important, because it is. And believe that even if you make mistakes now, it doesn't mean that they will define you forever. You're always learning. So keep going and don't let them stop you.
That's pretty horrifying and brutal that you hear that walking into film school. And this is why things have to change. That is not acceptable. We've got just under 2-3 minutes here, but I want Maritza for you to take a couple minutes on this, and then Vinay.
Yeah, sure. Two kind of big things, I think. Don't shrink yourself to fit what they want you to fit. I think early on, I started to shrink myself a little bit when I brought up topics of diversity and inclusion, or in the early days, 15 years ago. People would get kind of oh, that's a little controversial. I don't really feel comfortable. So you kind of shrink yourself a little bit. So I say to hell with that. Stop apologizing for who you are and where you've come from. You're here. You've earned your place. You are meant to be here, and you deserve to be here. And the second part of that is to be kind. Be kind to yourself, because of everything that you've gone through. You're still here, and boy, am I happy that you are here. And I want to work with you.
Don't shrink. That is fantastic, because the systems that we were all brought up in here were designed to put different other people forward and others not. So that is really great. Thank you for saying that. Vinay, you're going to get one of the final words here.
Yes. So like I said in the beginning, as an immigrant trying to survive, and then it's a survival game when you are starting out. And then there's always people who are going to tell you, oh, you're not good enough. There are 10 other people who does better job. And then, you know how many people I can hire for the, a lesser price. It's always a ground for exploitation of labor. In any field, actually, and especially in the design field, because when you're doing freelance design and animation or art or whatever, there's always oh, people want to pay you less or do that kind of thing. And then a lot of immigrants or people of color, they don't have the choice to say no to those kind of things, and they are victims of that. So I would suggest that people should always stand their ground, and then ask for what you're worth, and then just keep creating.
And I think we all recognize that depending on the circumstances, that is not always a simple or easy task, but know that there's communities of people like these fine people here who are out there to support you in that, and lean on that and leverage that. Andy and Maritza, I want to give you a chance in our last minute here. If there's any projects you want to plug. We heard about Vinay's film, but Andy?
No, I mean, I've got some shorts out there. Soul is out there. It's a crazy short that I've directed and co-written, and it's a sci-fi about a mother and a daughter, but it's playing at the Chicago International Film Festival, and my company has also produced a short called Path that I just recently played at BIFF, and now will be playing at Whistler. And that festival is now going full with in-person screenings and networks. So highly encourage you to go and see our film, but also, go to the festival if you're able to and you're comfortable with that. But I mean, we're all just kind of developing a lot of features right now and a lot of series and just seeing how that goes, but nothing right now.
Okay, well, it's good to know you've got films screening, so that's great.
Yes.
And Maritza?
Oh, yes. So with the help of Creative BC, I am now in the development stages of for an animated series I'd really like to do called From the West Side. It's based on where I'm from in the interior, and I want to focus on Indigenous-centered stories and primarily about women from the female lens. I think there's a lot to it, and I want to bring a little attention to that area and, show a little the humor and the levity that comes from where I came from. So
amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah, well, I mean, that went by super fast. So thank you to Real World. The festival continues until October 27th. So go realworld.ca and you'll see things. Thank you to Safia and Tanya and all the volunteers and staff at the Real World Film Festival for making this happen. We know it's not easy in this virtual world we're living in right now. And I'm grateful to all of you for just being, so authentic and sharing details. It's I'm going to tell everybody on my team certainly to watch this to hear what you all had to say. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon and take good care.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.